3 hours before the Malaxian Empire's fate began to shift, Commander Vazek boarded a derelict human ship, expecting another easy conquest. He found death, destruction, and a lone human medic tending to a lost cause. Her name was Lieutenant Alexandra Reeves, and she saved his life with a breath of air and a dangerous secret. What began as a simple capture would unravel an empire, proving that sometimes the most terrifying weapon isn't forged in battle, but found in the most unexpected place and wielded by the unlikeliest hand. Please wait. Before we start, tap that iCar button in the top right corner and smash that subscribe button. Right now, hit the notification bell so you're first in line when new stories land. Alright, let's dive into the story. 3 hours before the fate of the Malaxian Empire began to irrevocably shift, Commander Vazek led his boarding team onto a damaged human transport vessel. The void outside was a silent, star-dusted canvas, a stark contrast to the controlled chaos within the Malaxian cruiser. They had conquered 17 star systems, reducing diverse civilizations to footnotes in the Empire's history. Humans were expected to be another, a fragile, primitive species with laughably slow ships and weapons ineffective against crystalline armor. But expectations, Vazek was learning, were a dangerous comfort. The transport drifted, a wounded metal whale in the black ocean of space. Most of the humans were dead, their fragile forms shattered by depressurization or scorched by energy weapons. Vazek moved through the debris-strewn corridors, his crystalline armor humming softly, his breathing tubes filtering the ship's rapidly thinning atmosphere. Then he found the medical bay. Amidst the ruin, a single human female was alive, huddled over a patient, desperately working to stabilize vital signs even as her atmosphere vented. Her determination was a puzzle. The patient was clearly beyond saving, yet she continued, her face a mask of intense concentration and something else, something akin to grief. "Step away from the body," Vazek ordered, his voice translated into the harsh clicks and whistles of the human language. "You are now property of the Malaxian Empire." The human female turned slowly, her eyes, a startling shade of green, narrowed. She wore a uniform with a strange symbol, a red cross on a white background. Blood trickled from her nose, a sign of rapid decompression that should have incapacitated her by now. "I'm not property," she replied calmly, her voice surprisingly steady. "And my patient isn't dead yet." Those were her first words to him. Lieutenant Alexander Reeves, combat medic of the United Earth Defense Force, soon to be known throughout the Empire as the Crimson Healer. "Subdue her," Vazek ordered his soldiers, adding a mental note for caution. High Command wanted live specimens. As they advanced, Reeves reached for something. His soldiers raised their weapons, but she merely held up a small device displaying readings. "This ship's oxygen levels are critical," she stated, her gaze sweeping over Vazek's team. "Your boarding protocols probably included atmospheric adjustment, but did you compensate for the methane content in your breathing mix? It's toxic to your species at these concentrations." Vazek hesitated. How could she possibly know their atmospheric requirements? "You are bluffing," he said, though he subtly signaled his troops to check their environmental readouts. "Your pupils are dilating," she continued with unnerving calmness. "The membranes around your breathing tubes are turning purple. Early signs of methane poisoning." One of his soldiers, Drav, suddenly clutched at his throat. Another began coughing violently. Commander Vazek gasped a sharp intake of air through his breathing tubes. "Drav, the human is right. Environmental systems are showing dangerous methane levels. Impossible. This had to be a trick." Yet his soldiers were clearly in distress. "Remove your helmets," he ordered reluctantly, his voice tight. Weapons are trained on the human at all times. As soon as they exposed their breathing tubes, Reeves moved with surprising speed. She grabbed a canister from a nearby medical cabinet and released a fine mist into the air. Almost immediately, the burning sensation in Vazek's throat subsided. Neutralizing compound, she explained, her expression unreadable. You will live. Now, are you going to let me finish saving my patient, or do I need to remind you that I just saved 6 Malaxian lives when I could have let you choke? Vazek stared at her, a complex mix of fascination and disturbance swirling within him. Your patient is beyond saving by any medical science I'm familiar with. Then you have a lot to learn about human medical science, she replied, turning back to her work. Against his better judgment, Vazek ordered his troops to stand down and let her continue. 20 minutes later, to his astonishment, the critically injured human was stabilized and breathing on their own. They took both humans prisoner, of course. Such was protocol. But Vazek made a note in his report. This medic possessed knowledge that could be valuable to the Empire. Little did he know just how valuable and dangerous she would become. Chapter 2 High Command assigned Reeves to the medical research facility in their colony world, Caraxes Prime. Vazek was reassigned there as well, tasked with overseeing the human prisoners and extracting useful information. The human patient, Corporal James Turner, died during transport despite Reeves's efforts, a loss that sent her into a mood their scientists found deeply intriguing. You mourn inefficiently, observed Chief Scientist Morix during her initial evaluation of the human. The subject was doomed regardless of your intervention. His name was Corporal James Turner, Reeves corrected, her voice cold. And he died because your transport ships don't have proper medical equipment, not because he was doomed. Morix's breathing tubes flared, a sign of annoyance. You'll be given the opportunity to demonstrate your medical knowledge. If it proves valuable, your status may be elevated from prisoner to servant. Reeves smiled then, a facial expression Malaxians would all learn to fear. How generous! During her first week in the facility, they assigned her to treat minor injuries among the lower caste workers. Cuts, burns, simple fractures, nothing requiring sophisticated knowledge. Yet she approached each case with the same intense focus Vazek had witnessed on her ship. Why exert such effort for menial workers? Vazek asked her after observing a particularly lengthy procedure on a janitor's damaged hand. Reeves glanced up from her work, those strange human eyes fixing on him. Because they are in pain, Commander Vazek. Do your people have a different standard for who deserves to not suffer? Resources are allocated based on value to the Empire, Vazek explained, reciting basic principles. Lower caste injuries receive treatment proportional to replacement cost. How efficient, she replied with that strange inflection humans called sarcasm. And what's the replacement cost for a commander who ignores potential just because it comes in an unexpected form? Before Vazek could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Emergency medical teams rushed past their room toward the laboratory section. Reeves immediately stood up. What's happening? She demanded. Not your concern, human, Vazek said, but his communicator was already buzzing with urgent messages. Laboratory accident. Explosion in the biological weapons division. Multiple casualties, including 3 high scientists. We need to go there, Reeves said, somehow reading the situation from his expression. Now, this is a restricted area. Humans are not. Your medical teams can't handle trauma like this, she interrupted. I've seen how they work. Slow, methodical, by the book. This needs battlefield medicine. Fast décisions, triage, improvisation. She was right, though Vazek was reluctant to admit it. Their medical approach emphasized precision over speed. In emergencies, the resulting delay often meant more casualties. You will follow my direct orders, Vazek told her, making a quick decision. Any deviation and you will be executed immediately. Sure, she replied with that unnerving smile. Just get me there before more of your people die. The scene in the laboratory was chaos by Malaxian standards. 17 personnel lay injured amid the smoking ruins of expensive equipment. The medical team was overwhelmed, working on the highest-ranking scientist while others moaned in pain. Reeves surveyed the situation in seconds. "Who's in charge of this medical team?" she asked, her voice cutting through the din. "I am," replied Senior Medical Officer Traz. "This human has no authority here, Commander Vazek." "The human is consulting only," Vazek clarified. "Continue your work." Reeves pointed to 3 of the injured scientists writhing on the floor. "Those 3 will die in the next 10 minutes without immediate intervention. The one you are working on is already gone." Traz's breathing tubes flared indignantly. "Preposterous. High Scientist Kelbar is stabilizing. His chest cavity is completely compromised," Reeves countered. "You are wasting resources that could save those 3 instead." "How dare you question?" "She's right," interrupted one of the junior medics, earning glares from his superiors. "The readings indicate massive internal hemorrhaging. Survival probability is below the threshold." Traz looked to Vazek, clearly expecting him to remove the troublesome human. But something in Reeves's confident assessment made him pause. "Show us, human," he said finally. "Demonstrate your methods." Chapter 3, What Followed, was a display of medical skill that would forever change how the Malaxian Empire approached battlefield medicine. Reeves moved with astonishing speed, improvising tools from available materials, delegating tasks to shocked Malaxian medics who found themselves obeying her crisp commands. "Pressure here. More coagulant. No, your biological systems are different. This will work better. Trust me." And remarkably, they did trust her. Within 30 minutes, she had stabilized all 3 of the scientists she identified as salvageable. High Scientist Kelbar died as she predicted, but the others survived, including 2 who, by Malaxian medical standards, should have been unsavable. As they left the laboratory, the medical staff stared at Reeves with a mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. Vazek studied her as they walked back to the prisoner quarters, noting how the blood of his species stained her hands and clothing, crimson against her pale skin. "You saved valuable members of our research team," Vazek acknowledged. "High Command will be informed of your cooperation." "I didn't do it for your High Command," she replied tiredly. "I did it because they were suffering and I could help." "A peculiar philosophy," Vazek noted. "Inefficient. And yet I just saved 3 of your scientists while your efficient system would have let them die." She stopped walking and faced him directly. "Your empire has amazing technology, Commander, but your medicine is medieval. You prioritize rank over survivability and protocol over innovation. It's wasteful. You would do well to guard your tongue. Human," Vazek warned her. "Your usefulness has limits." She laughed, a sound Vazek found deeply unsettling. "No, Commander. My usefulness is just beginning to show itself. And I think your empire is about to discover how valuable a human medic can be in a war zone." Vazek should have executed her then. The military protocol would have justified it. A prisoner speaking with such insolence. But she was right. Her usefulness was just beginning, and the Malaxian Empire would never be the same because of it. Word of the miracle worker spread quickly through the facility. Within days, Reeves was being requested for consultations on difficult cases. Within weeks, she was teaching improvised trauma techniques to junior medical officers, all while remaining officially a prisoner of war. "The human has created an unexpectedly profitable situation," noted Governor Persak during their monthly assessment. "Mortality rates in the facility have decreased by 14%. She is still dangerous," Vazek cautioned. "Her loyalty remains with Earth." "Of course," agreed the governor, "but loyalty can be redirected with proper incentives. The human values preserving life above all else. We can use that." And use it they did. The next phase of Reeves's journey with them began with her first deployment to an active battle zone, the contested moon of Terrace 4, where their forces were locked in brutal combat with a human military outpost. "You will treat our wounded soldiers," Vazek informed her as they prepared to board the transport. "Demonstrate the same skills you showed at the research facility, and your status will be elevated further." Reeves regarded him with those unervingly direct eyes. "And if I refuse?" Then you die, and we find another human medic to replace you." She nodded slowly. "At least you are honest, Commander. But let's be clear about something. I will treat your wounded because they are wounded, not because you are threatening me. The day that changes is the day you will regret having me around." Vazek dismissed her warning as typical human bravado. The Crimson Healer was valuable, yes, but ultimately just another tool of the Malaxian Empire. He had no idea that he was delivering to the battlefield the most terrifying weapon either side had yet encountered. Chapter 4 Terrace 4 was a nightmare of mud and blood. The humans had established defensive positions in the mining complexes that honeycombed the moon's surface, forcing Malaxian troops into brutal close-quarters combat. By the time their transport landed at the forward command post, casualty rates had reached 23%, an unacceptable figure by Malaxian standards. Field Marshal Dreenak greeted them with obvious skepticism. "This is the miracle worker? A human female barely larger than a juvenile Malaxian? Size is rarely correlated with medical skill," Reeves remarked casually as she surveyed the makeshift field hospital, "though your medical tent organization suggests you believe otherwise." Dreenak's breathing tubes constricted dangerously. "Watch your tone, prisoner." "I will watch my tone when you watch your wounded," she replied, pointing to the overcrowded recovery area. "You are mixing trauma categories. Respiratory injuries should be separated from exoskeletal damage. Cross-contamination is killing your soldiers as surely as human weapons." Before Dreenak could respond, an explosion rocked the compound. The ground trembled beneath their feet as alarms blared. "Human artillery strike," shouted a communications officer. "Direct hit on the southern perimeter. Multiple casualties incoming." Dreenak turned to his medical chief. "Prepare for incoming wounded. Priority to officers and specialized units." Reeves stepped forward. "That's exactly why you are losing soldiers. Triage should be based on survivability, not rank." "This is not your decision, human," Dreenak snarled. Actually, Vazek interjected, surprising himself. High Command is granted the human authority over medical protocols during this trial period. Dreenak's eyes narrowed, but another explosion cut short his objection. Within moments, the first wave of wounded soldiers poured into the medical tent. The scene rapidly descended into controlled chaos. Reeves moved with practiced efficiency, her hands steady as she assessed each injury. "This one first. Tension pneumothorax in the secondary lung chamber. You prepare a ventral decompression. You start plasma replacement. Move." The Malaxian medics hesitated, looking to their chief for confirmation. He reluctantly nodded, and they scrambled to follow Reeves's instructions. What happened over the next 6 hours will become legendary in Malaxian military history. Reeves transformed the disorganized field hospital into an efficient trauma center. She improvised treatments for injuries their medics had deemed untreatable, salvaged limbs that would have been amputated, and reduced the mortality rate by 60% in a single shift. But it was what happened during the second human artillery barrage that truly changed everything. "We are receiving reports of a new chemical agent," announced the communications officer. "Unknown composition. 3 squads down with respiratory failure." The medical chief paled visibly. "Unknown agents require quarantine protocols. We cannot risk contamination of the command post." Reeves, elbow deep in a soldier's chest cavity, looked up sharply. "You are going to abandon your troops?" "Standard protocol," the chief replied stiffly. "Until the agent is identified and neutralized, exposure risks must be minimized." "Bullshit," Reeves muttered, using a human expletive their translators couldn't properly convert. "Commander Vazek, I need a transport to the affected area." "Absolutely not," Dreenak intervened. "The prisoner remains contained within the medical facility, while your soldiers suffocate. That's not very Malaxian of you," Reeves challenged, her eyes flashing with that dangerous intensity Vazek had come to recognize. "I have studied human chemical weapons extensively. I can identify and likely neutralize whatever they are using." Vazek made a quick calculation. If she succeeded, it would be a significant victory. If she failed or attempted escape, she would die. Either way, the Empire would not lose. I will escort her personally, he decided, ignoring Dreenak's protest of full containment protocols. Chapter 5. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the forward position. The scene was grotesque even by war standards. 24 Malaxian soldiers lay convulsing on the ground, their breathing tubes swollen shut, skin turning a sickly yellow. Reeves knelt beside the nearest victim, examining him with her portable scanner. Nerve agent specifically designed for Malaxian respiratory systems. Clever. It targets the filtration membranes. Can you treat it? Vazek demanded. Better, she smiled grimly. I can reverse engineer it. Over the next hour, Vazek watched as Reeves not only treated the affected soldiers, but collected samples of the agent. By the time they returned to the command post, she had developed both a treatment protocol and, more impressively, a countermeasure. Your breathing membranes absorb certain compounds directly, she explained to the astonished medical staff. This neutralizing agent can be dispersed as an aerosol. Anyone exposed will be temporarily protected against the human weapon. Field Marshal Dreenak personally observed as the treatment was administered to a test group. When all of them recovered without complications, his attitude toward the human medic noticeably shifted. Your service to the Empire will be recognized, he told her stiffly. Perhaps there is value in your species beyond simple labor. Reeves just nodded, too exhausted to offer one of her cutting remarks. But Vazek noticed something in her eyes as she watched the recovered soldiers return to their units. A calculating look that should have warned him what was coming next. The breakthrough came 3 days later. A major human offensive had been repelled, but at a heavy cost. As their forces pursued the retreating humans, Reeves approached Vazek with an unusual request. I want to treat the human wounded, she said bluntly. Out of the question, Vazek replied immediately. Your skills belong to the Empire now. The Geneva Conventions require medical treatment for all wounded combatants, she insisted. Even your Empire has signed interstellar treaties on warfare conduct. Prisoners are treated according to value, Vazek reminded her. Standard protocol. There's nothing standard about this situation, she countered. Look, I have proven my value to you. I have saved hundreds of your soldiers. Now, I'm asking for one concession. Let me establish a neutral medical station for all wounded. Vazek should have refused. The military doctrine was clear. Yet something in her argument resonated with him, perhaps because he'd seen firsthand how her unorthodox approaches yielded results. I will consult with Field Marshal Dreenak, he said finally. No promises. To Vazek's surprise, Dreenak approved the request, though with significant restrictions. The propaganda value alone is worth the experiment, he reasoned. Showing the humans we can be merciful may undermine their resistance. The neutral medical station was established in a small valley between the opposing front lines. It was marked with the ancient human symbol for medical neutrality, a red cross on a white background. Reeves worked tirelessly, treating wounded from both sides without distinction. Word spread quickly among the human forces. Soon, their medics began approaching the neutral zone, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as they realized the ceasefire was being honored. This is how medicine should work, Reeves told Vazek one evening as they watched Malaxian and human medics working side by side. Healing shouldn't recognize battle lines. An impractical philosophy for wartime, Vazek observed. Is it? She gestured to the medical tent. Your medics are learning techniques they never would have developed on their own. The humans are learning about Malaxian physiology. Both sides benefit. She was right, of course. The exchange of medical knowledge was yielding unexpected benefits. Malaxian recovery rates improved dramatically as human techniques were adapted to their physiology. Even Dreenak was impressed by the results. But what none of them realized, what Vazek failed to see despite all his military training, was that Reeves was playing a much deeper game. Chapter 6, it began with small things. Wounded human soldiers who should have died somehow stabilized. Malaxian troops recovered suspiciously quickly. Messages passed in medical code between human medics. At the time, Vazek attributed the anomalies to improved techniques and dismissed the security reports. Then came the night that changed everything. A massive explosion rocked the Malaxian command post. The initial reports indicated a catastrophic equipment failure, but Vazek knew better. This was sabotage. He rushed to the neutral medical station only to find it abandoned. Reeves was gone, along with 6 human medics and, most alarmingly, 3 Malaxian medical officers who had worked closely with her. Find them. Dreenak roared when Vazek reported the situation. This was her plan all along. The medical knowledge, the neutral zone, all to infiltrate our ranks. The truth, as always, was more complex. They captured one of the fleeing Malaxian medics 2 days later. His testimony chilled even Dreenak's battle-hardened soul. "The humans showed us what we have become," the medic said, his voice steady despite the torture he had endured. "Our medical protocols are based on efficiency, not compassion. We let the lower caste suffer because they are deemed less valuable." She showed us another way. "Treason," Dreenak spat. "You betrayed the Empire for an enemy's philosophy." "No," the medic replied, "for a better philosophy. The human didn't just treat bodies, she treated minds. She listened to the grunt soldiers, the ones you discard like broken equipment. They began to trust her. Then they began to question. The implications were staggering. Reeves hadn't just been healing bodies. She'd been sowing dissent, spreading dangerous ideas about equality and compassion that threatened the very foundation of their hierarchical society. But the situation deteriorated rapidly after that. Reports came in from multiple fronts of Malaxian medical staff implementing unauthorized protocols, treating lower caste soldiers with the same priority as officers, sharing restricted medical knowledge with captured humans, and even refusing direct orders to abandon wounded during retreats. High Command was furious. Dreenak was relieved of command. Vazek was tasked with hunting down the source of this medical insurgency. Lieutenant Alexandra Reeves, now known throughout both human and Malaxian forces as the Crimson Healer. The hunt lasted months. They track her through 3-star systems as she moved between battle zones, always one step ahead of their forces. Wherever she went, the pattern repeated. Improved medical care for all ranks, followed by questioning of military authority, followed by small but significant acts of rebellion. When they finally cornered her on the forest moon of Alice, Vazek expected to find her commanding a rebel medical unit. Instead, they discovered something far more dangerous. A full-fledged field hospital where Malaxian and human wounded were being treated side by side, with no distinction of rank or species. Commander Vazek, she greeted him calmly as his troops secured the facility. "I've been expecting you." "Lieutenant Reeves," Vazek replied, maintaining formality despite the circumstances. "You are charged with espionage, sabotage, and inciting rebellion against the Malaxian Empire." "Interesting charges," she observed. "Is healing the wounded considered sabotage? Is teaching compassion classified as rebellion?" "You know exactly what you have done," Vazek accused. "You have undermined the foundational principles of our society." "Your society was already undermined by its contradictions," she countered. "You claim to value efficiency, yet you waste potential based on arbitrary caste distinctions. You claim military superiority, yet your medical practices were medieval before I arrived. I didn't create this situation, Commander. I just exposed it." Vazek signaled his troops to take her into custody, but to his shock, they hesitated. Their breathing tubes fluttered with uncertainty. Chapter 7, one of them, Sergeant Kravix, actually stepped between Vazek and Reeves. "Commander," he said stiffly, "the prisoner has saved 17 members of our unit, including my clutch brother. Military protocol requires consideration of significant service to the Empire." Vazek stared at him in disbelief. "Step aside, Sergeant. That's an order." "With respect, sir," Kravix replied, his voice steady. "I cannot comply with that order." It was happening again, right in front of Vazek. The same subversion that had spread through their medical corps was now infecting his troops. "This is why your superiors fear me," Reeves said quietly, her gaze sweeping over the hesitant soldiers. "Not because I'm a brilliant medic. There are better doctors than me on both sides of this war. They fear me because I treat everyone as equally worthy of care. And that idea is more dangerous to your empire than any weapon." "You won't succeed," Vazek told her, though his conviction was weakening. "The empire has stood for 10,000 years. I don't need to succeed completely," she replied with that unsettling smile. "I just need to plant the seeds of change. Look around you, Commander. It's already happening." And it was. Throughout the facility, Vazek could see Malaxian soldiers, not just medics, but combat troops working alongside humans, sharing food, exchanging stories, and treating each other as equals. The barriers of species and rank had dissolved in this small pocket of the galaxy. The High Command would call it contamination, treason, or a violation of the natural order. But standing there, seeing the respect in his troops' eyes as they looked at this human medic, Vazek couldn't help wondering if she was right. "What do you want, Reeves?" Vazek asked finally. "Peace talks," she said simply, "not surrender. Neither side would accept that. But negotiations. This war has gone on long enough, and both sides are suffering needlessly." "You overestimate your influence," Vazek scoffed. "One rogue medic cannot end an interstellar conflict." "One rogue medic?" "No," she agreed. "But thousands of converted soldiers from both sides, medical corps who refuse to prioritize officers over grunts, supply chains disrupted by workers who suddenly question why they are supporting a war that kills their kind, that could end a conflict." The worst part was she wasn't wrong. Reports have been flooding in for weeks about disruptions throughout the Empire, all traced back to her influence. The Crimson Healer had become more than a person. She'd become a movement. Vazek made the hardest decision of his military career that day. Instead of arresting Reeves, he opened a direct channel to High Command and, with her standing beside him, proposed immediate ceasefire negotiations. The war didn't end that day, or even that year. But it changed. Zones of medical neutrality spread throughout the conflict areas. Prisoner exchanges became common. Treatment protocols were standardized across both forces. And slowly, painfully, the killing diminished. 5 years later, as Vazek sat across from Reeves at the formal peace conference, he finally asked the question that had haunted him since their first encounter. "Did you plan this from the beginning? From that first moment on your damaged ship when you spoke about methane poisoning?" She laughed at that same unnerving sound Vazek had first heard years ago, though now it seemed less threatening. "Planned to be captured by aliens and transform their society through medical ethics? No, Commander. I just did what any good medic does. Identified the disease and treated it as best I could." "And what disease was that?" Vazek asked, genuinely curious. "The belief that some lives matter more than others," she replied simply. "The most dangerous pathogen in the galaxy." The treaty was signed the next day. The Malaxian Empire didn't fall as many had feared. Instead, it transformed slowly, painfully, with many setbacks, into something different, something that retained its strength while incorporating new ideas about value and compassion. As for Lieutenant Alexandra Reeves, the Crimson Healer, she established the first interspecies medical academy in the neutral world of New Geneva. Rumor has it that even High Command sends their young there to study, though they would never publicly admit it. And Vazek? He became an instructor at that same academy. Not because he had embraced all of Reeves's radical ideas, but because he had seen firsthand how dangerous it is to underestimate the power of healing and the even greater power of treating every being as worthy of care. In the end, the most feared healer alive taught both humans and Malaxians the same crucial lesson. True healing isn't just about mending bodies. Sometimes it's about healing entire civilizations, one radical act of compassion at a time. And that was the end of the story. Comment below if you want the next chapter, and hit that like button. Please subscribe, turn on the bell, and, as always, keep the last light burning.